Walk away quietly and let the silence speak. That's how the real power begins. Not in arguments, not in explanations, but in that quiet decision to step back and protect your peace. You don't storm out, you don't announce it, you simply let go. And that's what changes everything, because silence has a way of saying what words never could. It doesn't beg, it doesn't prove, it reveals. It shows who was real and who was only comfortable while you were carrying the weight. When you walk away in silence, it's not an ending, it's an awakening. You realize that peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the absence of chaos disguised as love. It's the moment when you finally stop asking, "Why can't they see my worth?" and start realizing you were never meant to prove it. That shift, that invisible moment of clarity, is the rejection they'll never recover from. Because you didn't fight them, you stopped feeding them. You stopped giving them the attention that made them feel powerful. They'll feel it everywhere. In the messages you don't send, in the space you leave behind, in the energy that no longer reaches for them. They'll call it rejection, but deep down they know it's something else. Justice. The same silence they used to control the connection now becomes their consequence. And as they replay every moment, every word, they'll begin to see the truth that you've already learned. Nothing destroys ego faster than indifference. You walk away in silence, and they start to crumble in noise. They tell stories, they project, they distract, but nothing fills the gap. Because silence leaves an echo, and that echo is your calm. It reminds them of what they lost. Someone who cared without condition, who gave without keeping score, who loved without manipulation. And now that energy is gone. That's the real power of absence, when your calm becomes their mirror. This is what Stoicism really looks like. Not detachment from emotion, but command over it. It's the art of staying still when everything tempts you to react. It's emotional control in motion, the kind that makes silence your greatest language. You're no longer asking for respect. You're living it. You've learned that peace is not found in being heard, but in being unbothered. And somewhere in that quiet distance they start to understand, not because you told them, but because your silence taught them. They'll remember your calm, your steadiness, your strength. They'll miss the energy they thought they could replace. But by the time they realize what your silence truly meant, you'll already be gone. Not just from their life, but from their reach. Because silence doesn't end stories. It rewrites them. It takes the chaos and turns it into clarity. It transforms heartbreak into evolution. And that's why walking away quietly will always be the loudest rejection they'll ever feel. Underneath all the noise, there's a moment when you just stop. You stop explaining, stop proving, stop chasing someone who only ever met you halfway. It doesn't happen in anger, it happens in silence. That kind of silence that doesn't need to announce itself because it's not a tactic, it's a truth. You reach that point when every unanswered message, every half-hearted word, every small withdrawal finally adds up to a decision. You're done trying. And that single quiet choice hits harder than any confrontation ever could. You used to think the loud endings were the painful ones, the ones with screaming, tears, doors closing. But you learn that the loudest break is the one that makes no sound. The moment you pull back not to punish, but because you finally understand your own worth. It's a kind of peace that comes after chaos, like the quiet that settles once a storm has spent itself. You feel the exhaustion in your chest, the calm that says, enough. That's the exact moment when the story flips, when power changes sides. You walk away in silence and they start to hear everything they once ignored. They don't understand it at first. They confuse your silence for weakness, thinking they've finally won because you stopped fighting. But that's what they never expected. Someone who doesn't argue, doesn't explain, doesn't chase. They've always lived off your reactions, your need to make things right, your desire to be seen and understood. Now all they have is the emptiness left behind when you decide not to play anymore. And that silence, it becomes the mirror they can't escape. It reflects their own fear back at them, the fear of not mattering, of being irrelevant in the life of someone who once cared deeply. When you stop trying, it isn't indifference, it's clarity. You finally see that you were never asking for too much. You are asking the wrong person. That realization doesn't come with bitterness. It comes with a quiet kind of relief, because you finally understand that love isn't supposed to feel like begging. You start noticing how heavy it had become to constantly carry both sides of the connection, your effort and their avoidance, your presence and their distance. The silence gives you back your balance. It makes you realize that peace isn't found in someone else changing. It's found in you refusing to keep losing yourself. Meanwhile, they start to feel it. Not right away, but slowly, like a shadow creeping across their day. The absence they thought they wanted begins to feel uncomfortable. They check their phone out of habit, scroll through old conversations, replay moments they once dismissed. The same silence that used to give them control now presses on their chest like weight. They remember your voice, the warmth in the way you said their name, the steadiness you brought into their chaos. And what hurts most isn't that you're gone, it's that you didn't announce it. You didn't need to, you just vanished into peace, and that peace burns deeper than anger ever could. This is what silence does when it's real. It teaches without teaching. It exposes without confrontation. It leaves space wide enough for regret to echo. You're not trying to make them feel rejected. You're just done performing for someone who mistook your patience for weakness. And ironically, that's when they start to miss you, not because they suddenly understand love, but because they've lost the comfort of your effort. They realize too late that your attention was never guaranteed, that your forgiveness had an expiration date, that your silence isn't a gap, it's a boundary. Walking away in silence isn't about pride, it's about self-mastery. It's about emotional control, the kind that doesn't need to prove power, it embodies it. You're no longer explaining your value, you're living it. And while they're busy wondering what happened, you're already somewhere else, calmer, stronger, untouchable. This is the moment where strategic silence becomes transformation, where Stoicism stops being a concept and becomes muscle memory. You don't need revenge or closure or final words. The silence already said everything, and deep down, they know it. The truth is, they will hear your silence louder than any goodbye. It will echo in the spaces where your presence used to be, in the routines they thought would always include you. And one day, when they realize you're not coming back, that's when the worst rejection begins. Not because you hated them, but because you healed. You stopped proving, stopped needing, stopped pleading for the connection to work. And that's the one rejection that no one ever truly recovers from. Because it's not just about losing you, it's about facing what they refused to give. And that silence, that quiet exit, will follow them far longer than your words ever would. They always thought control was power. As long as they could decide when to talk, when to vanish, when to give just enough attention to keep you hoping, they felt safe. Power for them was never about love. It was about management, managing distance, emotions, and access to their heart. They mistook control for connection, believing that love was something they could ration, not something they had to nurture. What they never understood is that emotional distance doesn't protect you, it just isolates you. And when you finally stop trying, when you pull away without drama, they're left alone with the very silence they built to keep you out. In relationships like this, silence used to be their weapon. They would retreat just to watch you chase, test your loyalty, feed their ego with your persistence. Each unanswered message made them feel powerful. Every apology you sent gave them confirmation that they mattered more. They relied on your emotional consistency to keep their own chaos hidden. But the day you stopped, everything shifted. The dynamic flipped in an instant. You didn't announce your withdrawal, you just didn't reach out anymore. The silence that once fed their confidence started eating away at it. They began to feel the same uncertainty they once caused. That's the irony of emotional power. When you chase, you feed their illusion of superiority. But when you stand still, when you choose calm over reaction, the illusion breaks. Silence becomes a mirror that exposes who's actually dependent on whom. They thought they were free by staying detached, but their freedom existed only as long as you stayed emotionally invested. When that investment ends, so does their control. They don't know what to do with peace because peace doesn't respond to manipulation. Your silence removes the reaction they relied on to feel alive. And suddenly, they're the one checking their phone, scrolling through old texts, trying to understand when they lost their grip. You see, silence doesn't just change communication. It changes the balance of power. The person who once dictated when connection happened now feels helpless. They start overanalyzing every small thing you used to do effortlessly. Why haven't they called? Are they seeing someone else? Did they stop caring? The same mind that once felt safe by staying distant now becomes haunted by the quiet. They wanted control, but control without attention feels like emptiness. And for the first time, they realize that your presence wasn't a burden. It was the anchor keeping their world from collapsing. That's the unseen power of emotional control. It's not about winning arguments. It's about choosing not to engage in them at all. You don't need to prove that you cared. You already did. You don't need to remind them what they lost. Life will do that for you, because eventually they'll face the one thing they spent years avoiding, themselves. Silence is the great revealer. It strips away excuses and justifications. It forces them to see their own reflection without the distraction of your effort. And that reflection, it's uncomfortable. It shows how fear disguised itself as independence, how pride disguised itself as strength. The more they think about it, the more they understand what they destroyed. You didn't walk away to punish them. You walked away to protect yourself. And that's something they can't fight. They can argue with words, but they can't argue with absence. They can replace conversations, but they can't replace peace. That's why silence works. It doesn't chase, it doesn't plead, it doesn't explain. It just stands there, quiet and immovable, reminding them that they lost access to something real. And that loss echoes longer than any goodbye. Now they live inside the same distance they once created. Every quiet night feels heavier. Every morning feels emptier. They keep telling themselves they're fine, that this is how they wanted things. But deep down, they know this isn't freedom. It's the consequence of emotional avoidance. They've built a life that looks calm on the surface, but feels hollow underneath. And that hollow sound? That's your silence echoing. It's not revenge. It's reality. Because silence has a strange way of balancing things. It doesn't punish, it reveals. It shows who valued presence and who took it for granted. It exposes who was authentic and who was just comfortable. In the quiet, masks fall. And the person who thought they had control finally learns that power without empathy is just emptiness wearing a crown. There's always that one night when it clicks. You're lying there staring at the ceiling, replaying everything you said, everything you gave, and suddenly you realize nothing you do will ever be enough for someone who feeds on distance. That's the night you stop fighting for clarity and start building it, not from them but from yourself. Letting go in silence isn't weakness, it's the beginning of wisdom. It's you understanding that love without balance becomes survival, and you were never meant to survive inside someone else's chaos. At first, your mind fights it. It wants to send that one last message to explain your side, to show you cared, but you don't. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally understand that peace costs you your old patterns. Every time you tried to prove your worth, you built their comfort at the expense of your own. So this time, you choose stillness. You don't post, you don't hint, you don't chase. You step out of the invisible battlefield and decide that your silence will speak for you. That's the real decision point, the shift from trying to be heard to mastering quiet presence. The world around you might not notice the difference, but you do. There's power in that moment when your energy stops revolving around someone who couldn't meet you halfway. The same energy that once begged to be seen now returns to you. That's what strategic silence really is. It's a boundary made of calm. You're not ignoring them, you're protecting yourself. You're not giving the cold response. You're giving yourself warmth that they could never provide. And that clarity doesn't come with fire. It comes with calm authority, the kind that says, I don't need to explain my peace. As you detach, everything feels strange. You start to notice how much space was taken up by waiting for messages, validation, reactions. Now that space is quiet, and at first it feels uncomfortable. But slowly, that quiet turns into freedom. You start sleeping better. Music hits differently. You begin to enjoy your own company again. That's not loneliness, that's recovery. What you thought was obsession was really just a pattern, and breaking that pattern is what self-mastery looks like in real time. Meanwhile, they feel it. They don't see your silence as indifference, they feel it as loss. Because you were always the constant, the one who explained, forgave, reached out first. Without your energy feeding their sense of control, they start spinning. It's not that they miss you right away, they miss the emotional certainty you gave them. They were addicted to your effort, not your presence. Now that the effort is gone, they have to face their own emptiness. That's what silence does, it forces people to meet themselves. You might not see their reaction, but it's there. In the way they scroll your profile but never interact. In the way they bring your name up casually, pretending they're fine. In the way they post louder, laugh harder, live faster, all to fill the void you left without saying a word. But you don't react because this isn't about winning anymore. It's about peace. You've learned that silence doesn't demand closure. It is closure. It's the quiet decision that says, I'm done trying to fix what was never mine to fix. Every day you stay silent, your strength grows. Your detachment stops being defensive and becomes divine. You're not running from emotion, you're redefining it. The kind of emotional control you're building doesn't look like coldness. It looks like discipline. You're learning how to choose your energy wisely, how to hold your reaction until it no longer needs to exist. That's how you begin to master Stoicism in real life, not as a philosophy but as a habit. Letting go in silence isn't about proving a point. It's about living without tension. It's about understanding that peace is a luxury that chaos can't afford. And the day you stop trying is the day you realize something they never will. You were never fighting for love, you were fighting for recognition. And the moment you recognize yourself, the fight ends. That's why your silence hurts them. It shows them the difference between being wanted and being valued. Now, every move you make comes from strength, not need. You no longer explain what your absence means, because it's self-evident. The person who once needed to be understood has become the person who no longer requires understanding. That's emotional freedom, the kind that doesn't look back, doesn't chase, doesn't resent. It just walks away in silence. Silence is easy to imagine, but hard to practice. The first days feel like walking through fog. You want to check your phone, refresh your inbox, scroll through their posts just to know what they're doing. That impulse is your mind detoxing from the addiction of attention. Every reaction you once gave, every text you once sent, was a hit of temporary relief. Now, the silence stretches out like a mirror, showing you how much of yourself was spent trying to hold on to someone who never met you halfway. And yet you stay quiet. You breathe through the discomfort. Because silence isn't the absence of noise, it's the rebuilding of self. This is where the real silence strategy begins. It's not passive, it's deliberate. You start crafting distance the way an artist crafts meaning, carefully, purposefully, knowing that the space itself will tell the story. You stop posting to prove you've moved on. You stop explaining to prove you're strong. Instead, you just live. You show through calm consistency that you're no longer part of their emotional economy. They can't buy your attention anymore, can't bait you into reaction, can't manipulate you into proving your care. You've turned your absence into the most powerful message possible, because it doesn't seek response. Over time, that silence becomes louder than any confrontation could have been. They start to feel it in the pauses between their distractions. A song plays, and they remember you. A smell lingers, and you come back to them, not as a person, but as a consequence. The absence becomes haunting because you're no longer accessible. The same silence they once used as a weapon now sits heavy in their own chest. They used to wait for your reaction to feel important. Now, without it, they face their irrelevance. And that's a kind of punishment no words could ever deliver. The truth is, walking away in silence is not about disappearing. It's about reappearing somewhere else, stronger, calmer, and untouchable. You start pouring your focus into yourself, workouts that ground you, projects that challenge you, moments that remind you what peace actually feels like. Every day you choose not to react is a day you rewire your brain away from chaos and toward control. You start craving quiet instead of closure, solitude instead of validation. That's what self-mastery looks like when it's lived, not just quoted. They notice the shift even if they pretend not to. They can feel the gap in energy, the missing texts, the lack of explanations, the calm tone in your last words. It's not anger that gets them. It's your composure. Because people who thrive on control crumble in the face of indifference. They can fight emotion, but they can't fight neutrality. They can argue against passion, but they can't argue against peace. Your silence becomes their paradox. Every second they try to ignore it, it echoes louder. Sometimes they'll test the waters. Hey, a comment on a story, a random memory dropped at midnight, but you already know what it is, a reaction test. You don't respond, not out of spite, but out of awareness. You understand that silence doesn't need to defend itself. The moment you answer, the power shifts back. So you let the message sit unread, unseen, unanswered. That's not cruelty, that's control. It's not about winning, it's about keeping your energy where it belongs, with you. What makes this phase so powerful is that you're no longer living for reaction. You start noticing small things, the way your breathing slows when you're alone, the way you laugh easier without walking on eggshells, the way peace feels heavier but purer than chaos ever did. This is Stoicism in practice, not suppressing emotion but mastering it. You feel everything, but you don't let it control your direction. Silence, when intentional, becomes a shield that protects your focus and your dignity. And here's the twist. They start missing you, but not the version they used to control. They miss the calm you brought into their storms, the safety you gave without asking for anything back. But that version of you doesn't exist anymore. The one who chased, explained, forgave, that person was born from confusion. The one who now stands in silence is born from clarity, and clarity never begs. This is the beauty of the power of absence. It teaches without teaching, it speaks without words, it breaks patterns without confrontation. By stepping back, you let reality teach the lessons your words never could. You let your peace do the talking. You let time become your ally instead of your enemy. And slowly, inevitably, they'll feel what you once felt, the sting of being unseen, unheard, unvalued. Except this time, there's no one left to explain it to them. The silence you're holding now isn't the kind that fades. It's the kind that defines you. It's the calm after you stop performing for people who never showed up fully. It's the boundary that says, I don't owe anyone access to my peace. And the longer you hold it, the clearer it becomes. Silence doesn't end connections, it reveals their truth. They always break the silence first, though not in the way you expect. It won't be an apology, not yet. It'll come disguised as curiosity, an accidental message, a story reaction, a random check-in after weeks of nothing. They'll act casual, like they're just being polite, but you'll feel the energy underneath. Restlessness, insecurity, fear. Because when you mastered silence, you rewrote the script. They were used to being chased, to being the center of emotional gravity. Now, without your effort feeding the dynamic, they're weightless, floating in their own uncertainty. The control they once had over your emotions has dissolved, and they don't know how to handle it. They'll test you with their subtle moves, trying to see if the old version of you still exists. The one who replied instantly, who over-explained, who cared too much. But this time, you don't take the bait. You've learned that not every message deserves a response. Not every emotion deserves an audience. Your stillness becomes their lesson. Every time they reach out and meet your silence, it chips away at their illusion of control. The same silence they once used to punish you has now become their own undoing. At first, they might mock it. Oh, so now you're ignoring me? Or, you're acting different. That's what people say when they realize their influence no longer works. They'll create narratives to soothe their ego, calling you detached, cold, dramatic. Anything that helps them believe they still have a place in your head. But the truth is, you're not acting. You've evolved. They're reacting to your growth, mistaking your peace for pride, your emotional distance for revenge. But what they don't understand is that silence isn't about them anymore. It's about you reclaiming yourself. Then comes the unraveling. When all their distractions fail, when the nights get too quiet, they start remembering the details. The way your voice softened when you said their name, the calm they felt in your presence, the safety they didn't know how to appreciate. Regret doesn't hit like a wave. It drips slowly, quietly, until it floods their thoughts. They realize you were never asking for too much. You were giving too much to someone who wasn't ready to receive it. That realization doesn't come with peace. It comes with panic. because deep down they know they won't find that kind of connection again. But while they're drowning in what-ifs, you're learning the art of emotional discipline. You no longer chase closure, you create it. You no longer seek explanations. You understand them without words. You start to see silence as a living thing, a form of communication that doesn't need sound to make its point. Every second of restraint builds strength. Every moment you resist the urge to respond is another brick in the foundation of your self-respect. That's how the quiet becomes powerful. It teaches you how to exist without proving your value. And this shift confuses them more than anything. They thought you'd stay available forever, orbiting around their moods and whims. But when you stopped trying, the entire dynamic collapsed. The person they once pushed away now holds the emotional high ground. You've become unpredictable in the most peaceful way, no longer reactive, no longer reachable through guilt or flattery. You don't need to punish them. Your indifference does that naturally. They're not haunted by your anger. They're haunted by your calm. Eventually, the guilt sets in. They start replaying the past, rewriting moments, imagining how things could have been different if they hadn't taken you for granted. But it's too late. You've already outgrown the version of yourself that tolerated half-love. You've seen what chaos costs, and you'll never pay that price again. The silence you hold now is not empty. It's full of lessons, boundaries, and self-worth. It's not the absence of communication. It's the presence of clarity. The beauty of this stage is that it's no longer about waiting for them to understand. It's about realizing that understanding doesn't change anything. You can't teach someone to value you if they only learn through loss, and that's what your silence represents. A consequence, not a performance. They're finally living inside the emotional distance they once created, and the walls are closing in. So you keep holding that calm line. You don't block out of spite, but you don't open doors out of pity. You exist in that quiet, powerful space where nothing needs to be explained anymore. That's what Stoic calm feels like. Steady, unmoved, dignified. You no longer chase apologies because you've learned that the silence itself delivers them. The lesson isn't in what they say, it's in what they can't. And every time they try to escape that realization, it follows them. Your absence, your peace, your quiet strength. What they don't realize yet is that your silence is no longer about them. It's about legacy. It's about rewriting your emotional story so that no one else ever gets to drain your energy without earning it. The silence you're holding now is the foundation for the rest of your relationships, the kind built on balance, not chasing. And that's why, as they crumble under the weight of their regret, you rise quietly, unbothered, untouchable. Growth doesn't happen in noise, it happens in quiet repetition. The silence that once felt like punishment becomes your discipline, your daily ritual of peace. You start noticing how different life feels when you're not checking for validation, when your mind isn't tied to someone else's inconsistency. The mornings feel lighter, the nights stretch softer. You start creating a rhythm that's not built around waiting, but around living. This is where self-mastery begins, not in controlling others, but in controlling your own reactions. The transformation doesn't come all at once, it sneaks in. You realize you haven't thought about them all day. You realize you didn't feel that old pull to look at their page or reread the last conversation. The silence that used to echo like loneliness now hums like freedom. That's the moment when Stoicism stops being something you read about and becomes something you live. You're no longer chasing peace, it's chasing you. Your emotional control deepens. You begin to see how unnecessary most conflicts are when you don't need to be understood. The energy you used to spend explaining yourself now goes into building yourself. You work out, you learn, you create, you rest. You build new connections that don't drain you. You begin to look like the version of yourself you were always meant to be, the one who doesn't confuse attention with affection or noise with connection. You understand that love doesn't need to be dramatic to be real. It just needs to be mutual. The best part is how subtle the change is. People around you start to feel it before they see it. There's something different about your calm, the way you walk into a room without trying to be seen, yet somehow everyone notices. That's silent power, not loud, not flashy, just grounded. You've become what they always feared you'd become, someone who no longer needs them to feel whole. And as that peace grows, Regret begins to grow in them. They watch from a distance as you become exactly who you were meant to be, without their chaos holding you back. But the door they once took for granted is gone. You don't even have to close it. It disappeared the day you realized you were never supposed to stand outside begging for entry. Your silence built a new life on the other side, one where they no longer exist. That's the paradox of healing. The calmer you become, the louder your absence screams in their world. The more you detach, the more they obsess. The more you grow, the smaller they feel. But you don't look back anymore. Because peace has a gravity of its own, it keeps you where you belong. You've turned your silence into a home, your calm into armor, and your growth into the final word. You'll notice it slowly, the reversal the moment everything starts to make sense. The same silence that once weighed heavy on you now sits heavier on them. They finally feel what you felt: uncertainty, emptiness, the ache of being unseen. It's not punishment, it's perspective. Life always finds a way to deliver balance, and your calm has become their consequence. The absence they once used to feel powerful now exposes their weakness. The one thing they thought they controlled, your attention, is gone and there's no way to get it back. They'll try to replace what they lost, but copies never carry the same weight. They'll go out, distract themselves, talk about how unbothered they are. But silence follows them everywhere, in the car, in bed, in the middle of a laugh that doesn't reach their eyes. Because silence doesn't stay where it's placed. It echoes. And every echo reminds them of how it used to feel when your presence was still there. That's when the regret psychology begins. The slow understanding that they didn't lose you because you stopped loving. They lost you because they never learned how to love back. Meanwhile, you've become something new, something they can't access or define. Your peace has turned into mystery, and your absence has become magnetic. You're no longer reacting to their chaos. You're leading with emotional control. You move differently now, calm, steady, unreadable. The same person who once lost sleep over their silence now sleeps deeply, dreaming about new beginnings, new energy, new alignment. You've mastered detachment strategy, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You know that not everyone deserves access to your softness, that not everyone can handle the version of you that loves deeply and purely. There's a strange beauty in this stage. You no longer wish them harm, but you no longer wish them back either. You stop needing them to see what they lost because you've already seen what you gained, yourself. That's what healing silence really does. It brings you back to your own voice after you've spent too long echoing someone else's. You become grounded, mature, and fiercely self-respecting. And that's the real power of absence. It transforms pain into peace without ever asking permission. As for them, they'll replay it all. How they withdrew, how they ignored the signs, how they thought they could always come back when they wanted. But now the door isn't locked, it's gone. You didn't slam it, you outgrew it. That's the kind of rejection they never forget, the one delivered through calm indifference, not anger. The one that says, "You had access to me when I was still becoming. You'll never meet the version I became because of what you did." And that truth hurts deeper than any confrontation ever could. Because they don't just miss you, they miss who they were when you cared. You represented the version of themselves they wished they could get back, the one that felt seen and safe. But your silence has made it clear, that version no longer exists either. The connection they destroyed wasn't a phase, it was the chance to grow with someone who genuinely tried. Now that chance is gone, replaced by echoes and lessons. This is where you realize that silence doesn't just heal, it teaches. It teaches you boundaries, self-worth, patience, and restraint. It teaches you how to stand in your own authority without needing validation. It teaches them too in its own merciless way. And the greatest irony? They'll never admit it out loud. But every time they see something that reminds them of you, every time peace feels foreign and noise feels tiring, they'll remember the one who mastered what they couldn't, stillness. And so the circle closes. What began as silence ends as transformation. You didn't just walk away, you elevated. You didn't just let go, you transcended. That's the power dynamic they'll never recover from. Realizing the person they thought was weak became the strongest through quiet. Because the loudest revenge is peace. The most powerful closure is silence. And the real victory is living like they never broke you at all. There's always a moment after the noise fades when you realize you were never losing them. You were finding yourself. The silence that once felt like punishment becomes your peace. The distance you once feared becomes your protection. You stop seeing rejection as a wound and start seeing it as redirection. Because what broke you wasn't the loss. It was the illusion that love had to hurt to be real. And now that illusion is gone. They'll think your silence was an act. They'll call it cold, dramatic, maybe even cruel. But the truth is simpler. You just stopped participating in your own pain. You stopped performing for someone who didn't know how to appreciate presence. That's the transformation no one warns you about, the kind that looks like indifference on the outside, but feels like liberation on the inside. You didn't become heartless, you became whole. You didn't stop caring, you stopped wasting care where it wasn't received. That's what strategic silence teaches you. That peace doesn't come from fixing what's broken. It comes from not letting what's broken keep breaking you. That's Stoicism in its purest form, calm that doesn't need explanation, strength that doesn't seek validation, and dignity that doesn't negotiate. You begin to live differently. You answer less, react less, explain less, and somehow life starts to respond more. This is the part they don't see, the rebuilding. The long mornings where you choose quiet over chaos. The long nights where you learn to breathe instead of beg. The transformation that happens when you realize that being alone is not the same as being lonely. That peace doesn't need proof, it only needs practice. And that silence, when owned, becomes the most magnetic energy in the world. So if you've made it here, calmer, wiser, quieter, don't doubt what that silence means. It means you've outgrown what used to destroy you. It means you've learned that walking away isn't losing. It's leading yourself back home. It means that the loudest closure you'll ever give someone is the peace of never explaining again. Now let this message travel further. If you found strength in these words, share this video. Someone out there is still trying to find meaning in their silence, and your share might be what wakes them up. Subscribe to stay close to this kind of clarity and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next lesson in emotional control and silent power. And if you feel called to support the work that keeps this message alive, tap the super thanks button below. Not as charity, but as a way to help this movement grow. Every act of support amplifies a truth the world desperately needs to hear. Peace isn't passive, and silence isn't empty. It's full of power. Because in the end, walking away in silence isn't rejection. It's revelation. It's the moment you stop chasing closure and start living it. And that right there is the freedom they'll never forget.